Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you for coming to tonight's lecture, despite the pretty bad weather out there. My name is Noor Abdulrazak. I am a senior here at MIT with the MIT MSA. And we are pleased to bring Syed Ammar Nakshawani here from the UK to talk about the misconceptions of Shia Islam. We know sometimes that this issue can be a little sensitive, and so we just wanted to emphasize that the purpose of tonight is really just to promote unity and dialogue. And so, inshallah, all of us leaves here benefiting from this lecture. Just to give you a little overview or background on Syed Ammar, he earned a degree in psychology and law at the University of College of London. Having completed a diploma in modern political change in Britain from the London School of Economics, he then completed an MA in Islamic Studies at the Islamic College for Advanced Studies. Syed Ammar is currently completing the final year of his PhD on Islamic historiography at Exeter University. And just to give you a brief overview of how tonight's lecture will go, we'll start with a 45-minute talk, and then he'll go into a 30-minute question and answer session to where you guys can write your questions down on the piece of papers that hopefully you guys have. If not, just let me know. And hopefully that way we can get a little more questions in by the end of the night. So thank you, and please join me in welcoming Syed Ammar. In a second, just let him continue.
Just before I start, if you wouldn't mind noting down what I've just written on the blackboard. I thought I might get a whiteboard, but I suppose MIT prides itself on its classic nature. So we'll go ahead with the beginning of the discussion. Usage of the word Shi'ah in Quran and tradition. If you could note this down, it will help the flow of the lecture, hopefully. I just put it on. That's so much. Do it like this one. Okay, usage of the word Shi'ah in the Quran, the tradition. Number 2, Ibn Saba, Jamal, Ghadir. Number 3, theology. Number 4, jurisprudence. Number 5, Karbala stroke Messianism. And I'm going to move here. The future of intra-faith dialogue. Okay, so I'll just repeat them again before I start. Usage of the word Shia in Quran and tradition. Number 2, Ibn Saba, stroke Jamal, stroke Ghadir. Number 3, theology. Number 4, jurisprudence. Number 5, Karbala and Messianism. Number 6, the future of intra-faith dialogue. If I could just have a hands up when everybody completes their 6 points, and then we can begin the discussion. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا وعظيمنا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع نفوسنا أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين وأصحابه الغر الميامين الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. Ammar ba'd, respected brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. The discussion concerning misconceptions about Shia is a fundamental discussion in religious and secular thought, and is therefore a discussion which affects each and every one of our lives. a discussion with a historical basis and a contemporary significance. Contemporary in the sense that the word Shi'ah can be viewed on both the print and the visual media throughout the world today. That in many discussions of religion and politics, the word Shi'ah is spoken of by many political commentators, especially relating to the schisms of the Middle East and the different problems between the countries of the Middle East and their external relations. For example, constantly in the news you may hear about the idea of the Shi'ah of Karbala or the Shi'ah of Najaf and the different civil wars that may have occurred over the last 5 or 6 years within Iraq. Likewise, you hear about the discussions of the Shi'ah of Lebanon, the Shi'ah of Iran, and the relations between the Shi'ah of Iran and those of America. Put forward the idea that the word Shi'ah is listened to by many. Likewise, that the word Shi'ah is instrumental in much of the political thought of the relationships between the Middle East and the Western world. And that's why if one were to only look at one of the books recently written by Vali Nasr, the book known as the Shi'ah Revival, highlighting the idea that possibly more so in the last 5 years than at any time before have people become accustomed to the word Shi'ah. In the past, one may have heard the word Muslim, but now the word Shi'ah has become prevalent everywhere, highlighting a need for us to understand the very background of this word and the background of those who follow this ideology. That's why the operative word at the beginning of this discussion comes from the title that I've been given, misconceptions. Throughout our lives, many human beings may come across one misconception or another. I may have a misconception about a member of my family, a misconception about a member of the community, a misconception about a political figure, or indeed a misconception about an ideology. Yet the most important aspect of any misconception is whether you remain stagnant with that misconception or whether you open yourself for dialogue surrounding that particular misconception. Because we know very well that there are 2 words which linguists may place alongside misconceptions. One word is the word prejudice, and the second is the word stereotype. And that's a community which is full of misconceptions, or which prejudges people, or which is stereotypical, is a community that does not open its mind for free thought. Whereas Muslims within the audience will know very well that the Quran stresses on the idea of dialogue between different members of the community. For example, in chapter 49 of the Quran, verse 13, the verse comes forward and states, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Ya ayyuhan nas, inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha, wa ja'alnakum shu'uban wa qabaila lita'arafu, inna akramakum 'inda Allah atqakum. O mankind, we have created you from male and female, and from different races and tribes, in order that you get to know one another. The idea being, and postulated by Ali ibn Abi Talib in one of his famous lines when he says that the people are of 2 types. They are either your brothers in faith or your equals in humanity. I may have somebody who's of the same school as me in Islam, or somebody who may come from a different school. I may have somebody of the same religion, or somebody from a different religion. The aim of humanity shouldn't be that we build misconceptions without asking the members of that particular group whether our misconceptions are justified or no. As in, would you believe there are certain people in certain schools in Islam who are told, don't speak to these people. They are good at debating. They may indoctrinate you. When a school tells you that, you have to get a bit worried. As in, a person should be confident with their knowledge when they follow a school. If somebody goes and tells you don't speak to them, they are like people X, they may not be believers, but they have strong opinions, then it makes you think that, hold on, then why am I following your school if you don't allow me to play devil's advocate? A strong school in any religion is a school whose members should be allowed to play devil's advocate with their leaders, in order that all misconceptions are removed. And that's why if I were to tell you the number of misconceptions that I've heard about the Shi'ah within the Islamic world, some people would not believe. That's why when the question is asked, where do misconceptions come from? Sometimes misconceptions are very innocent, as in I may have heard something about a certain group. Innocently, I've taken it on board. I don't mean to fuel any arguments, but it's just that I remember someone telling me X about a group. I never went to read up further on it, and that was it. sometimes a misconception is built with people who have an agenda. And that's where the problem lies about the misconceptions about any school in Islam. When people have an agenda and fuel it. Let me give you an example. I came out of my hotel room from one very famous Middle Eastern country. You know it very well. And when I came out, it was my last day and I was checking out. They gave me a package. Me, being Iraqi, thinking there's free goodies in here, for example. And so what happened was, as soon as I took this package, I opened it and there was a cassette within there. And I was thinking, well, what's this about? When I went home to listen to the lecture, the first line of the lecture said, this has been produced to tell you that the Shi'ah revolution of 1979 was a kafir revolution. And that the Shi'ah are all disbelievers. And that they are an equation to the Zionists. That particular Middle Eastern country, in 3 lines, had already given us so many misconceptions. One was political, the other was theological, another was religious. And therefore, what did you find? I thought to myself, supposing that I listen to this, it might not affect me. But how many innocent Muslims who come to this country for their pilgrimage will be affected when they go back home? And that's why you find so much hatred between Muslims is sometimes agitated not by the non-Muslim, but by the Muslims themselves. I remember Ali ibn Abi Talib saying, our enemies are not the Jews and the Christians. Our enemies, our own ignorance. And when there are misconceptions about any school in Islam, it stems from our own ignorance. And that's why even Vali Nasr, amongst others, within the Shi'ah revival, mentioned some very interesting points about common misconceptions about the Shi'ah, which I'm sure some of you may have come across. He talks about how in Lebanon, there were certain non-Shi'ah in Lebanon who believed that the Shi'ah of Lebanon had tails. Now, I can assure you I don't have a tail. But there was this belief that the Shi'ah are born with tails. And that therefore the Shi'ah were made to look like animalistic figures rather than human beings. There's also a discussion that the Shi'ah of Saudi Arabia spit in their food before they give it to you to eat. Those of you who had lunch with me today, I don't think saw me spit in their food. But I can assure you that there aren't Shi'ah who will come forward and spit in your food. Likewise, the Shi'ah, the non-Muslims or the non-Shi'ah of Pakistan used to believe that the Shi'ah commemorate in Muharram Hussein by gathering together in a hall and committing adultery with each other. Would you believe? There was such a misconception. That they gather in a hall, men and women together, they switch the lights off, and they all commit adultery with each other. There was a belief in some of the Shi'ah in other countries, in some of the non-Shi'ah, who thought of this idea that the Shi'ah perform taqiyya. Be careful when they talk to you. What's taqiyya? Taqiyya is that they lie to you whenever they talk to you. You can never tell if they really mean what they say. There's another misconception that the Shi'ah believe Ali is God. There is that misconception that the whole Shi'ah world, let's just say 250 million people, all believe Ali ibn Abi Talib is God. As in when somebody normally says that, they'll never say to you, you know, there's a small group who believe. No, Shi'ah, Ali is God. You know very well it's only 1% or so who have such a belief. But they'll make it out as if it's a general belief. There's another misconception, that the Shi'ah are those who after their prayer begin to strike their hands 3 times. And they say, Khan al-Amin, Khan al-Amin, Khan al-Amin. Which paraphrased is, Gabriel made a mistake, Gabriel made a mistake, Gabriel made a mistake. And that is also spread as a misconception. And therefore, what is our point? Our point is that we recognize that there is no problem having misconceptions, but there is a problem when you don't go to look to alleviate those misconceptions. I don't mind if somebody comes and tells me that, you know what, I never knew this about you. But what I would say is, but why didn't you go and ask one of the scholars about this issue? Why did you live for years on hearsay? There are scholars out there who you can email, who will reply back to you. And that's why we begin our discussion by looking at the usage of the word Shi'ah. Because this discussion, as you could see, will take 6 stages. And within the stages, hopefully, we'll be able not only to clarify the misconceptions, but hopefully come on issues where us as Muslims can either agree to agree or agree to disagree. First and foremost, the usage of the word Shi'ah. If you can note the following down. The word Shi'ah has been used in the Quran with its derivatives on 6 occasions. The first occasion, chapter 6, verse 59 of the Quran. The second, chapter 6, verse 165 of the Quran. The third, chapter 28, verse number 4. The fourth, chapter 28, verse number 15. The fifth, chapter 30, verse 31 to 32. And the sixth, chapter 37, verse 83. If I was to look at a couple of them, they'll define for us what the word Shi'ah means. For example, chapter 37, verse 83 says, وَإِنَّ مِن شِيعَتِهِ لَإِبْرَاهِيمَ. And from amongst his followers was Ibrahim. Here, therefore, the usage of the word Shi'ah refers to the Prophet Abraham. Why? The idea here is given that the Prophet Abraham was amongst the followers of the Prophet Noah. In the order of the succession of the prophets, Abraham, of course, follows Noah. And that the idea was that Abraham's principles were similar to Noah, in that he was a prophet of God, who brought a message of monotheism to his people. There were people who surrounded the both of them who did not necessarily believe in that which they believe in. Both of them had trouble with the people of their time. As in Noah, the Quran mentions, for over 950 years, was trying to preach the message of God. And the Quran says the people, in some cases, or the majority of cases, would not listen to him. جَعَلُوا أَصَابِعَهُمْ فِي آذَانِهِمْ. They would come and bring their fingers and they would stick them into their ears. And that he tried and he would try until eventually the whole incident of the flood occurred. Likewise with the Prophet Abraham, the Quran mentions the story that Abraham was living in a time of idol worshippers, where his own uncle was an idol worshipper. He was brought up by his uncle. After many narrations say his father had passed away at a young age. And this uncle of his used to carve the idols. Abraham witnesses the creation of the sun, the moon, and the stars, and therefore comes to the conclusion of the belief in the oneness of God, and goes about trying to debate the idol worshippers about how idol worship is the biggest form of oppression, both to a human being and towards God. Therefore you found that the word Shi'ah was used. وَإِنَّ مِن شِيعَتِهِ. And from his followers was Ibrahim. That's one example. Then Shi'ah could have a second meaning. The party of. Some would say follower, party, isn't it the same thing? Not necessarily. A follower may be someone who follows your exact message. A party may be someone who's of your people. And therefore he's someone you collectively associate with. In Surah 28 verse 15, one of the references which I gave you. فَوَجَدَ فِيهَا رَجُلَيْنِ يَقْتَتِلَانِ هَذَا مِنْ شِيعَتِهِ وَهَذَا مِنْ عَدُوِّهِ. Prophet Moses walks through town. He sees two men fighting. One of them was the cook of Pharaoh. The other was from the children of Israel. One of them is an Egyptian. The other is an Israelite. Who obviously would be from the Shi'ah of Musa? It would be the Israelite, because Musa is an Israelite, but brought up in an Egyptian household. The Quran came forward and said, هَذَا مِنْ شِيعَتِهِ هَذَا مِنْ عَدُوِّهِ. One of them is of his Shi'ah, and the other one is of his enemies. Why? Because of his enemies, Moses was brought up in the court of Pharaoh. Yet Pharaoh used to believe, I am God, أَنَا رَبُّكُمُ الْأَعْلَى. I am the Lord the Most High. Even though he was brought up in his house, does not mean he's one of his followers. Yet once again, the word Shi'ah is defined by these two. That whenever anybody comes to you and says, what's the meaning of the word Shi'ah? It means the party of or the follower of. Can the word Shi'ah be next to somebody in opposition to the current Shi'ah? Of course it can. Because if the word Shi'ah means party or follower, I could say the Shi'ah of Hussein for the Shi'ah of Yazid. Do you understand the point? And that's why the schism over the Shi'ah of Kufa killing Hussein is a very wrong interpretation. How many times have you heard from people saying, it was you Shi'ah who killed Hussein? Are you feeling guilty? I defy anyone historically to show me a single Shi'ah in the meaning of the word which we're going to come to in our analysis, in the meaning of the idea of prophet and infallibles who succeed him, and the belief in Hussein as the third of those infallibles. I defy anyone to show me a single Kufan who believed in the Hussein as the third infallible who killed Hussein. Shi'ah of Hussein, because many ask this question, then what was the Shi'ah of Hussein? The Shi'ah of Hussein were two types. Were those who either believed Hussein was the third infallible, which I'm going to come to in a moment, or were those who said, we are your party who are against Yazid. Hence the words could be used as Shi'ah. I am from the party that's against Yazid. Did Yazid have Shi'ah? Yes, of course he did. Because again, the Arabic word Shi'ah is taken from the party of Hussein, and you see the Shi'ah of Yazid. That's why Hussein, while he's on the ground, in his final moments, before he dies, he makes a statement where he uses this word Shi'ah before he even passes away. He's on the ground. The opposition leader says, is he dead or is he alive? The grandson of the Prophet is on the ground. Arrows surround his body. They are not certain if he's dead or if he's alive. One of the leaders from the opposition, Shimr bin Dil-Jawshan, came forward and said, to know if he's dead or if he's alive, shout out, we're going to attack his woman. Because a true warrior will not lay on the ground while his women are being attacked. Hussein, the narration says, is on the ground. He tries to stand up, he falls. He tries to stand up, he falls. Then he calls out, O Shi'ah of Abu Sufyan. Listen to the wording. O Shi'ah of Abu Sufyan. Even, and then later on he says, O Shi'ah of Yazid. Even if you don't believe in a day of judgment, then at least be free men in your worship. Don't go and attack innocent women who have done nothing wrong to you. Notice the wording. He takes the word Shi'ah and completely transfers it to the opposition, highlighting that Shi'ah does not necessarily mean a religious connotation. It could be an individual word which refers to a group of people. Move on to number 2. Ibn Saba, Jamal and Ghadir. So when did these Shi'ah begin? As in, if you were to ask somebody now, these Shi'ah who exist in the world today, when did they begin? You find that there are 3 main arguments as to when the Shi'ah began. The first involves a very interesting man by the name of Abdullah ibn Saba. Abdullah ibn Saba is seen by many non-Shi'ah, I say quite unfortunately, as being the originator of what 250 million people follow in the world. How? They say that Shi'ism began from a Yemeni Jew. So the whole of the belief of the Muslims who are Shi'ah today is from a Yemeni Jew. That's the one who taught them all of their principles. So when 15 million people go to Karbala every year, it's because of a Yemeni Jew. He's the one who laid down the structure for them. This Abdullah ibn Saba, what was his original name? Abdullah ibn Saba ibn Sham'an. His father was called Sham'an. His mother, very important when we come to study context in a moment, was called Sauda. Hence, some people called him Ibn Saba, some called him Ibn Sauda. This person, his father, Saba, was one of those people who conspired to kill the second Khalifa, Umar ibn al-Khattab. They had got together and they conspired to kill the second Khalifa. When Uthman ibn Affan, the third Khalifa, came in, he ordered that those who conspired to kill Umar ibn al-Khattab had to be caught. Amongst the people who was caught was a person by the name of Harumaz al-Majusi. Harumaz al-Majusi. When Harumaz al-Majusi was caught, this is what the tradition says. Of course, it's not my opinion on the issue. It says, Haruman al-Majusi, when he was caught, Abdullah, the son of Saba, became angry. And therefore, this Abdullah bin Saba converted to Islam, not because he believed in Islam. No, because he wanted to get within the status quo. He left Judaism, yet he was still really someone who was Jewish. He got into the religion of Islam, and what did he begin doing? He began causing the companions of the Holy Prophet to have schisms between each other. Because as we know, Abu Dharr al-Ghafari and Uthman ibn Affan did not get on with each other at all. That's a very well-known fact. And so therefore, Abdullah ibn Saba was to blame for this. Ammar ibn Yasir, when he spoke out against Uthman bin Affan, again the reply was Abdullah ibn Saba was the cause of this. Abdullah ibn Saba was the cause again of the killing of Uthman bin Affan according to this school. Abdullah ibn Saba was also the man who formulated the Shi'ah that we see today according to this school. Why? Because they say Abdullah ibn Saba used to raise the position of Ali ibn Abi Talib to divinity. When he started to raise Ali ibn Abi Talib's position to divinity, they say that he is the man who would tell people, look, fight with Ali ibn Abi Talib and fight in defending him against the mother of the believers, Aisha, against Talha, and against Zubair. And that later historians would say the companions loved each other. There was no problem between them. It was a Yemeni Jew who caused all the friction. Later on, they say that Abdullah ibn Saba began Shi'ism, that he was the first Shi'ah of Ali. This argument is an absolutely absurd argument. And within the academic world, it's been denounced by many already. Those who want references can either go towards Yitzhak Naqash's discussion on this issue, or can go towards Taha Hussein's discussion on the issue, where they both come forward and say it's an absurd idea which is normally brought up to try and bring the Shi'ah's principles down. Abdullah ibn Saba, who began him, as in who narrates him? Sayf ibn Umar al-Tamimi. Sayf ibn Umar al-Tamimi, according to Imam al-Nasa'i, amongst others, according to Yahya ibn Mu'in, amongst others, according to Al-Hakim and Nisapuri, within the Mustadrak al-Sahihain, all of them come forward and say he's not a reliable narrator, to the extent that some of them come forward and say he's a fabricator. Some of them come forward and say he's a liar. Sayf ibn Umar al-Tamimi isn't just rejected as a narrator by the world of the Shi'ah. The Sunni schools narrate him, come forward and say that his narrations are to be taken as fabrications, number one. Number two, did a man exist by Abdullah ibn Saba? In my opinion, yes. A man did exist, but not the man who formed the Shi'ah. So who was the man who existed? There were three men, according to the chronicles of history, who were given the title Abdullah ibn Saba. Let me explain who they are. The first of them led the Khawarij fighting Ali ibn Abi Talib in the Battle of Nahrawan. Note that down, please. Ali ibn Abi Talib faced 3 civil wars when he became Khalifa. Ironic, if I say so myself. The first was Jamal, the second was Safin, the third was Nahrawan. The same people who had fought with him at Badr and Uhud came back later on to fight against him. What we find was that at Nahrawan, the leader of the army against Ali ibn Abi Talib was Abdullah ibn Saba. Number one, if you are the leader against Ali ibn Abi Talib, how you form the Shi'ah, only God knows. Number two, there was another man by the name of Abdullah ibn Wahab as-Saba'i. Note that down. Abdullah ibn Wahab as-Saba'i. Abdullah ibn Wahab as-Saba'i, the narrations say he came from the town known as Madain. And he came to Ali ibn Abi Talib. One narration says Ali ibn Abi Talib was on his horse one day, he was traveling. He saw this man eating. And he said to him, it's the holy month of Ramadan, why are you eating? He said to him, you are as you are. I said to him, what do you mean? He said, I believe that you are God. Astaghfirullah. When he said that, as soon as he said that, Ali ibn Abi Talib, the narration says, came down from the horse. He put his cheeks on the ground. And he said, I've been created from clay by the Lord. And he ordered this person that if him and his followers do not stop in their heretic ways, they will all be punished. Because in Islam, to claim that a human being is God is seen as the most worst of oppressive acts towards the religion. Therefore, Abdullah ibn Wahab as-Saba'i could not be the formulator of the Shi'ah, because there is not a single Shi'ah in terms of the mainstream who believe that Ali ibn Abi Talib is God. Number three, and I agree with Dr. Shaibi's PhD in Baghdad. A very interesting PhD for those of you who want to go even deeper into this discussion. Dr. Shaibi wrote a PhD in Baghdad University titled The 15 Proofs that Ibn Saba was Ammar ibn Yasir. Ibn Saba was Ammar ibn Yasir. Now he's got 15 proofs. I just want to give you a hint why. Ibn Saba's mother, what's her name, I said? What was her name? Sauda. Sauda literally means what in English? Darker complexion, let's say. Ammar ibn Yasir's mother was whom? Syiah. Syiah had a darker complexion. In Siffin, Amr ibn al-As does not call Ammar ibn Yasir by his name. He calls him Ibn Sauda. Why? Because there is a problem if you call Ammar by his name. Because the hadith was there, Ammar taqtiluka al-fi'atil baghiya. Ammar, you will be killed by infidels. If Amr ibn al-As says Ammar, then the narrators will straight away say that if you are fighting Ammar, then what does that put you in? And it actually happened because Muawiyah was not as careful. Muawiyah, in the narration, said Ammar ibn Yasir. When his companions heard, they said, Ammar ibn Yasir is on the opposition, because Ammar ibn Yasir on the day of Siffin was 93 years old. The companions said, he's in the opposition. The reply was yes. They said, Rasulullah said, Ammar taqtiluka al-fi'at al-baghiya. Ammar will be killed by infidels. Muawiyah said, we aren't the infidels. Why? He said, it's Ali ibn Abi Talib who has killed him, not us. Why? He said, Ali ibn Abi Talib brought him to war. So he's the one who's killed him. To which the reply by Ali ibn Abi Talib was, that means Rasulullah killed Hamza because he brought him to war. The point was what? Amr ibn al-As was saying, Ibn Sauda. Ibn Sauda, Ammar ibn Yasir, according to Dr. Shaibi, is Ibn Sauda. Because of the fact that one of the men who rose vehemently against Uthman ibn Affan, according to narrations, was Ammar ibn Yasir. Therefore, on the first level, did Abdullah bin Saba begin the Shi'ah? No. Let's move that. Number two, Jamal. Some academics say the first usage of the word Shi'ah of Ali was in the Battle of Jamal. Battle of Jamal was fought by whom? Uthman ibn Affan got killed. 3 wanted vengeance. Actually, I could say thousands wanted. But 3, let's just say, were the main ones who wanted vengeance. Talha, Zubair, and Aisha. They wanted vengeance. They said to Ali ibn Abi Talib, if you don't find the killers, then we're going to have to fight you. Ali ibn Abi Talib replied by saying, I have just been instilled as Khalifa. To find the killers is not something I can do overnight. It requires a proper courtroom where we bring everyone together. They said the killers are on your side and we're going to fight you. Academics come forward and say, the first Shi'ah were those who helped Ali ibn Abi Talib in the Battle of Jamal. Who were they? They said the first Shi'ah were people like Malik al-Ashtar, Muhammad ibn Abu Bakr, names along those lines, who were seen as the Shi'ah, meaning the party of Ali against Aisha at Jamal. Therefore, the second school came and said what? The first time the word Shi'ah was ever used in terms of the battlefield was in this area. The third group is seen as being the strongest. That the Shi'ah were those who held on to the belief that Ali ibn Abi Talib was the person announced as successor of the Prophet Muhammad before the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his family passed away. This is the Shi'ah mainstream. What do they say? They look at a hadith by the name of Hadith al-Ghadir. If you note down the following reference, in Sahih Muslim, volume 2, page 880, the abridged version, not the complete version, the abridged version, Dar es-Salam publishes, 2002 edition. Volume 2, page 880, abridged version, 2002 edition. If you go to that narration, it says, Zayd ibn Arqam is the man in the chain of the narration. He is asked by the companions, what happened when the Holy Prophet was on his farewell pilgrimage? Now here is a typical example of a Shi'ah using what is known as a classic Sunni reference. But of course the references can go further than this. Zayd says, we stopped at a place which was an oasis by the name of Khum. Hence you'll see many Shi'ah refer to this incident by saying, our origin is Ghadir Khum. We stopped at a place by the name of Khum. The Holy Prophet came forward in front of everybody, and he came forward and he said, "O people," he began to give the whole sermon until he reached the line that I am leaving behind for you two things which if you hold on to them, you will never go astray. This is Muslim's narration. The Quran, and then he says, my Ahlul Bayt, my Ahlul Bayt, my Ahlul Bayt, 3 times. The question then asked is, who are your Ahlul Bayt? The reply was, the followers of Ali. That's the narration which is there in Muslim. Therefore you found that the incident of Ghadir is where many Shia state was the first usage of this idea, that Ali and his Shia, those who hold on to the belief that Ali ibn Abi Talib was appointed successor before the Prophet Muhammad passes away, the Shia today are seen as being those. Because you know Shia, there are groups, Zaydis, Ismailis, Ithna Asharis. And we can go so deep into each one of them, Zaydis, Ismailis, and Ithna Asharis, but suffice for us to say that of those 3 groups of Shia, of which the Ithna Asharis are 85%, suffice for us to say that each one of them takes Ghadir as authentic. Then why is it that other Muslims don't? There's not a single Muslim who doesn't believe in the incident of Ghadir. But they differ over the interpretation of the word Mawla. The Holy Prophet is meant to have said, before he passes away, according to the Shi'ah, and according to other schools. But the difference is, how do you interpret the word Mawla? According to the Shi'ah, the Prophet says, you know in Arabic grammar, those of you who've studied Arabic grammar will know very well, the word qarina. Qarina means context. One word in Arabic can have 20 meanings, true? One word can have so many meanings. If you don't place the word in context, you're all over the place. It's like in English, you can have a number of words which can have a number of meanings. The word, for example, such as lion. If I say Alexander is the lion of the seas, of course it differs depending on context, the meaning of the word lion. The Prophet Muhammad, before he says, Men kuntu mawla, fahada aliyun mawla, before he says this, what does he say? He says, Alastu awla bikum min anfusikum. Alastu awla. Therefore the context of the word mawla is the word awla. If the word awla is not there, then the word mawla can mean a hatful of things. It can mean friend, it can mean slave, it could mean master, it could mean a number of things. But he says, Alastu awla bikum min anfusikum. Am I not the first in authority amongst all of you? The reply is yes. Men kuntu mawla fahada aliyun mawla. Now, someone comes forward and says, yes, Ali ibn Abi Talib, mawla doesn't mean master. Many who say it doesn't mean master don't put the word in context. They only say, I've heard men kuntu mawla, but mawla could mean friend. Why would he announce in front of 100,000 people his friendship to Ali ibn Abi Talib? Someone will reply back to me by saying, because Ali ibn Abi Talib and Khalid ibn Walid had a major argument before Ghadir. I'll say it's not necessarily a good thing to narrate. Ali ibn Abi Talib was in Yemen. Khalid ibn Walid was in Yemen. Khalid ibn Walid had tried to bring the people of Yemen towards Islam. He couldn't do it. Ali ibn Abi Talib went, he did it. Bukhari narrates they had a major argument about the spoils of Yemen, where Khalid ibn Walid was willing to come forward and say that Ali ibn Abi Talib has taken the spoils for himself. If we say that the reason he said Mawla was because of their argument, it's not something which Muslims want to come out clearly, that already before the Prophet Muhammad dies, certain people don't like each other. So it's better that the argument stays with the word Mawla and the discussion over the word. But the majority of the Shia are of the opinion that the origin of the word Shia refers to those who believe in the imamate of Ali. Hence you notice Sunni and Shia may come forward and say that we agree on most things. The one area Shia and Sunni do not necessarily agree on is the area of imamate. True? Imamate, some say it's called caliphate, others say imamate. To the Shia, the Prophet would not leave the world without announcing a successor. To the Sunni world, the Prophet leaves it towards his companions to choose that successor. That's the difference which arises here. Number 3, theology. So now we've recognized that the Shia emerged from this period. The question arises about their theology. Of the utmost importance is to understand that theology within the Shia world originates from the 12 Imams. Theology within the Shia world originates from the 12. In which way? In the fact that the crystallization of the theology of the Shia comes from the time of the 6th Imam. Because there's an important concept that needs to be understood. The Shia, basing their idea that Ali ibn Abi Talib is the first successor, base themselves on a narration which says that the Prophet Muhammad says, there will be 12 caliphs after me. Now, this narration is seen as authentic in all schools in Islam. Who those 12 are is the question Muslims differ over. According to the Shia, the 12 are the infallibles from the line of whom? From the line of Fatima. Now, of course, the Ismailis stop at number 6 and the Zaydis stop at number 4, but the Ithna Ashari majority go up to the 12th. The theology of the Ithna Asharis emerges from where? Emerges mainly from Ja'far al-Sadiq. Because out of all the Imams of the Shia, Ja'far al-Sadiq is seen as being the one who had the chance to spread the religion more than the rest, or spread the opinions. Importantly, what are the theological opinions which the Ja'fari school differs with other schools? The first one, predestination and free will. Let's note this down. Our brothers from other schools in Islam come forward and state there are different theological schools. As in, if you go to our brothers in the Sunni world, the Mu'tazila were a theological school. The Ash'arites were a theological school. And therefore, within the Sunni world, Sunni does not mean that everybody agrees on their theology. Theology can be so different within the Sunni world itself. You find, for example, here, the Mu'tazila on predestination and free will believed in complete free will. That the human being has complete free will being given to them by God. The Ash'arites, on the other hand, of the Sunni world, believe what? They come forward and believe that God has predestined all our actions. We only taste the flavor of the action. What was known as Nadariyat al-Kasb. You only taste the flavor of the action. Otherwise, God has predestined what you do. The Mu'tazila replied by saying, well, how could you say God has predestined all our actions? As in now, if God has predestined all Pharaoh's actions, Pharaoh can come on the day of judgment and say, why have you put me in hell when you predestined my actions? As in, couldn't Pharaoh turn around on the day of judgment and say, you predestined my actions. I wasn't bad because I'm naturally bad, or I made mistakes to be bad. You made me bad. The Ash'arite school came forward and said what? They came forward and they said, well, in the Quran, God says He guides who He wants to guide, and He misguides who He wants to misguide. And therefore, there was a difference within Sunni theology on this one issue, predestination or free will. The Shia came forward, the Ithna Ashariya, under the leadership of Ja'far ibn Muhammad al-Sadiq. They came forward and they said, we are in a position between the two positions. They asked him, what do you mean? I'm going to give quite a practical example. When he was asked, what do you mean? Are our actions predestined or do we have free will? And he replied by saying, it's somewhere in the middle of the two. When they said to him, what do you mean somewhere in the middle? He said to the person asking him, lift your right leg. So he lifted his right leg. And then he said to him, now lift your left leg at the same time. He said to him, I can't. He said to him, that's the ratio. There are some things we control, there are others controlled by God. And therefore the ratio was seen in this classic example, that within the Shiite school, there are certain actions in predestination free will, which God has already predestined, which man does not have a choice in. Whereas there are others which are in the hands of man. So how about the conundrum that I guide who I want to guide, and I misguide who I want to misguide? It's a conundrum, because if God doesn't like me, I'm not getting guided, am I? Because the Quran says He guides who He wants to guide, and He misguides who He wants to misguide. Ja'far al-Sadiq replied by saying no. You see, these were the key theological questions in his time, between himself and other theologians. He said, when God says, I want to guide whoever I want to guide, and I want to misguide whoever I want to misguide, it doesn't mean it as it's said literally. What do you mean then? He said it means God guides whoever is looking for his guidance. And he leaves in misguidance those who are not interested in his guidance. You see, if I say God guides whoever he wants to guide, and he misguides whoever he wants to misguide, then according to Ja'far al-Sadiq, it's not just that you guide whoever you want to guide. What's just in that? But according to Ja'far al-Sadiq, you guide whoever's looking for your guidance. And you keep in misguidance whoever doesn't want your guidance. In humanity, there are people who say, God, show us guidance. And there are others who say, we're not interested, we'll live this life as we want to live it. That's one theological issue. The second theological issue in the Shiite world, infallibility. What does infallible mean according to a Shiite? The conception is, infallible means imams can't sin. As you know, infallibility according to Shiites is that every prophet of God and the successors of those prophets, the imams, are seen as being infallible. Does infallible mean they can't sin? No. Infallible means they can sin, but they wouldn't sin. Can I now, for example, go and take an illegal substance? Yes, I've got the capability of walking towards the substance, picking it up, buying it, and taking it. The question is, would I take an illegal substance? According to the Shiite conception of infallibility, the idea was that a prophet of God can sin, but wouldn't sin. Two examples are given. The first, Ali ibn al-Hussein, the fourth Imam of the Twelfers, and of the Zaydis, and of the Ismailis, comes forward and states, someone asks him, you are meant to be infallible. It doesn't help us much. He said to him, why? He said, because you people are like robots. You can't sin. So how can we take you as an example when you can't sin? He said, it's not that we can't sin, it's that we wouldn't sin. He said to him, what do you mean? He said, if I were to tell you now, can you walk in the street naked? The reply was, yes, I can walk in the street naked. He said to him, would you? He said to him, no, I wouldn't. He said to him, why? He said, obviously because of the social surroundings. If people see me walking naked, they're going to think, what's he doing? He said, likewise with us, we can commit a sin, but we wouldn't because of the Lord that watches us. Can, but wouldn't. And therefore you find in the story of Yusuf in the Quran, the question is, could Yusuf had gone with Zulaykha? When she closes the door on him, can he be tempted by her desires? Yes, he can. Was he tempted? No, he wasn't. The capability of the human being and the desires means you can commit a sin. But they've got such a cognizance of their Lord that they wouldn't because of the Lord that watches them. The reason, therefore, they said infallibility is key within Shia theology is that they said in terms of the prophets, God tells us to obey them. God would not tell us to obey those who themselves can't look after their own life. If a person himself is constantly sinning, or if a person is making mistakes, how can I obey someone who himself is constantly making errors? And so therefore this rationality came forward and said that when a verse tells you in the Quran, obey the Prophet, if you say the Prophet can commit a sin, then you are saying that the message is not one which flows. I have to obey someone who commits a sin. The question then arises, how about the verse which says the Prophet Muhammad frowned at the blind man? The Shi'ah do not believe he frowned at the blind man. They believe it was another of his companions who was sitting there who frowned at that blind man. Someone will say, how dare you say it was that companion? The reply is, how dare you say the Prophet would have such manners? It's ironic that if you came to someone now and said, it's another companion who frowned at the blind man, you'll find people who'll jump up and say, how dare you? Well, hold on a minute. You're willing to say the Prophet who brought morality would frown, but a normal companion wouldn't? And so you found here that unlike the Sunni theology, which states that the Prophet Muhammad would not sin and would not commit error in revelation, but may commit error outside of revelation, the Shia come forward and say, in every area of his life, there is no sin or no error whatsoever. Likewise, this infallibility is transferred to the Imams who are seen as the protectors of the message of the Prophet Muhammad. And the Shiites within their theology use chapter 4 verse 59 as saying that the leaders and authority from amongst you are to be obeyed in the way Muhammad was obeyed. Number 3, a third theological principle, intercession. The Shiites are of the belief of the narration of the Prophet Muhammad that 3 groups of people will be able to intercede for us on the day of judgment. Who are they? The first group are the prophets of God. This is known in the Arabic language as shafa'ah. The first group who can intercede for you on the day of judgment are the prophets. The second are the scholars. The third are the martyrs. They can intercede for you on the day of judgment. Someone will turn around and say, then why do you believe your imams can have shafa'ah? Well, if you look at each imam of the Shi'ah, be it Ja'far as-Sadiq, be it Ali ibn Musa, be it Zayn al-Abidin, do you agree that they were scholars in their time? I think most Muslims agree. Do you believe they died as martyrs? I believe both Muslims agree. The intercession equation adds up there. Therefore, you find theologically, these are seen as being amongst the main beliefs. Number 4, jurisprudentially. Why do you pray with your hands down? That's a question that's constantly asked. What's that stone that you prostrate on? Why do you combine your prayers? Jurisprudence. Interesting area. Once again, our Sunni brothers, when it comes to jurisprudence and theology, there are differences. Theologically, if I ask somebody who's from another school in Islam, theologically, what are you? He may say to me, I'm an Ash'arite. Jurisprudentially, what are you? I'm a Hanafi. As a Shi'a Ithna Ashari, theologically you are Ja'far ibn Muhammad. Jurisprudentially you are Ja'far ibn Muhammad. There's no need to go to anyone else. Theologically, someone will ask, why do you bring Ja'far ibn Muhammad's name so much? Is it because he's the highest authority? No, he's not. But in the time when Islamic knowledge and beautiful constructive dialogue was taking place, Ja'far ibn Muhammad would debate with Abu Hanifa, who would debate with Malik ibn Anas. And then later on you had Imam al-Shafi'i and Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal. That period was a period of crystallization as well as a period of discussion on jurisprudence. Why do the Shia pray their hands down? Well, one may equally ask the question, why do the Malikis pray with their hands down? If you go to North Africa, you may find in Tunisia or Morocco or Algeria a group who all pray with their hands down. Have you seen anyone attack them? Someone will say, well, the narration is Malik bin Anas lost his hands, and that's why. Someone comes forward with such narrations that there was a period when someone had lost their hands, and that's why. Malik ibn Anas was so scrupulous in the hadiths that what is the Muwatta? The Muwatta is a book of narrations which comes from the people of Medina. Because to Malik ibn Anas, he differed with Abu Hanifa when it came to jurisprudence. Malik ibn Anas would say, the hadiths which I narrate within the Muwatta are from Medinan narrators, people from Medina. Why from Medina? Well, if we say Malik ibn Anas was born in the earliest part of the 2nd century, he wants to be as close as possible to the Prophet Muhammad, sure? So he's going to take his jurisprudence and his hadiths from those who lived in Medina and who saw the way the Prophet Muhammad developed his jurisprudence. If Malik ibn Anas and the Maliki school pray with their hands down, well, if the Ithna Ashari pray with their hands down, what's the big difference? How about when it comes to combining the prayer? The basis of the jurisprudence of combination of prayer, number 1. In Ithna Ashari thought it's more recommended to separate than combine. Although unfortunately you'll find most Ithna Ashari Shia lazy, but you'll find the majority of them will come forward and tell you that you have to separate, but then you can combine. Imam al-Bukhari, within his ahadith, mentions numerous occasions, outside of travel, outside of when it was raining, where the Prophet combined his prayers, without a shadow of doubt. But when the Prophet was asked by Ibn Abbas, why do you combine your prayers? He said, this religion has come to bring ease and not hardship. It's ironic that some of us who live in the Western world, our lunch breaks are so tight that combination helps sometimes. Or sometimes by the time we get home, we don't want to pray Asr late. It helps sometimes. And its basis, once again, is jurisprudential. And the other schools in Islam have their opinions about combination. If I'm not mistaken, the only one who's strict on it is Abu Hanifa, who says only at Muzdalifah you can combine. Other than that, no. Malik ibn Anas and Shafi'i are much more lenient on their rulings regarding combination. What's the stone you pray to? You polytheists. Well, what's that big black cube you all pray to? It's ironic how the human being's mind is so fickle. We all pray to a big black cube. That's not shirk. But a small piece of clay this big, they're all mushrik. No, I don't pray to the cube. I pray to God, but the cube is how I reach God. Well, the same with the clay. I don't pray to that piece of clay. But from the narrations that I've read, the Prophet Muhammad, on his forehead, there used to be the marks of mud. If there were marks of mud, it meant he was praying on clay. Those who come forward and say we pray on carpets, I don't mind. It's a jurisprudential ruling. But just one thing, carpets came into the Prophet's mosque 300 years after he died. So I don't know which one's closer to his sunnah. 300 years later when the carpets first came? Or is it a case of what? Is it a case of the mud? Someone will say, well, the mud has to be from Karbala. No, it doesn't have to be from Karbala. I've prayed on the mud of Manhattan, of all holy places. You pray on mud. Mud is earth. So you come forward and you prostrate on there. How many prostrations are there in the prayers? 2. What's the philosophy of the first one? You came from clay. What's the philosophy of the second one? You're going to return to clay. So what's the best thing to prostrate on? Clay. If you go to the very root of the philosophy of worship, the very root tells you you came from clay and you'll return to clay. When you prostrate on the clay, you are returning to the very essence of humanity. But it doesn't mean that it has to be from Karbala. Because there are some, I'm not going to deny, Shi'ah will come forward and say, my clay has to be from Karbala. If it's not from Karbala, what do you mean it's got to be from Karbala? It's a piece of clay, for goodness sake. You just put your head down. The reason Karbala has prominence is because the Prophet Muhammad himself would constantly narrate that my grandson will be killed in Karbala. That's why. And because he used to say, Husaynun minni, wa ana min al-Husayn. Ahabba Allah, man ahabba Husayna. Hussein is from me. I am from Hussein. Allah loves the one who loves Hussein. That's why the reason came forward to say that the dust of Karbala, which was given to Salama, became blood when Hussein died. And that dust is a holy dust. Therefore, that's another jurisprudence issue. Ashhadu anna aliyan waliyullah. It's a jurisprudential issue. They say the Shi'ah say, Ashhadu anna aliyan waliyullah. It wasn't there in the time of the Prophet. You're right, and I agree with you. Is it obligatory? No, it's not. Any Shi'ah who says, Ashhadu anna aliyan waliyullah, that I swear that Ali is the guardian of Allah's message on earth, after, of course, Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, anyone who says Ashhadu anna aliyan waliyullah with the idea that it's part of the adhan, his adhan is void. It's not part of the adhan. So why did Ashhadu anna aliyan waliyullah come about then? I'll tell you what, if for 60 years in Islamic history, this man was being cursed from the pulpits in Syria, 60 years. And anyone who doubts him being cursed from the pulpits can only go to the hadith books. Because I don't know about you, but I don't think Marwan ibn al-Hakam loved Ali ibn Abi Talib. Nor do I think Abdul Malik ibn Marwan loved Ali ibn Abi Talib. Nor Yazid ibn Abdul Malik. Nor Walid ibn Yazid. Would you love the man who annihilated your ancestors at Badr and Uhud? Do you not remember in Siffin when Ali ibn Abi Talib walked in front of Muawiyah and said to him, you don't remember what I did to your dad in Badr? Your granddad in Badr? Because in Badr, who was the one who finished Muawiyah's granddad? Hind's father. He said to me, don't remember? That's why Yazid, when he killed Hussein, the famous lines of poetry came forward. Later أشياخي ببدر شهدوا جزع الخزرج من وقع الأهل لا أهلوا واستهلوا فرحا ثم قالوا يا يزيد لا تشل لعبت هاشم بالملك فلا خبر جاء ولا وحي نزل. Yazid himself said, I wish my ancestors were present. He had Hussein's head next to him. He used to poke the head of the grandson of Rasulullah while his head was next to him. And he used to say, I wish my ancestors from Badr were present so that they see what I have acted. Bani Hashim, there was no revelation and there was no news. They just played with the kingdom. Later on, the very people who Muhammad fought at Badr and Uhud became the very caliphs who looked after the religion of Islam. And that's why Ashhadu anna aliyan waliyullah was a political response to the cursing of Ali ibn Abi Talib on the Friday prayer. Go to any book of narrations. Mughira bin Shu'bah, Ziyad bin Abih, Kufa, Basra, khutbah of Salat al-Jum'ah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. May God curse Ali ibn Abi Talib. Because you know Ali ibn Abi Talib is seen by many schools as the fourth caliph. I ask you to go and see when he became the fourth rightly guided caliph. You think it became straight away? Ahmad ibn Hanbal, if it wasn't for him, holy prophets. But Umar ibn al-Khattab believed it's something which is a good innovation. Just because a brother of mine in another school in Islam has that innovation which is there, then you find that it's not a cause for disagreement. It's a cause for bringing the jurisprudence together. The next area, which will conclude for us, Karbala and Messianism. The Shi'ah, many people see them straight away and say, the people of self-flagellation. True? How many of you see the images? Blood everywhere. And it's understandable if there are a group of Muslims who come out there and say, look at these barbaric animals who are self-flagellating themselves and coming forward and hurting themselves and putting pain on themselves. First and foremost, it's ironic, those who come forward and attack the Shi'ah for their love of Hussein, considering I think we can go Muharram after Muharram with many of those who claim to love the grandson of the Prophet, not listening to one lecture on his life the whole year. And I'm certain of that. In Syria, the Mufti of Syria, who's a friend of mine, who's someone I had lectured for within Syria, and I've been to that area, himself gives a khutbah where he says, why have they not told us what happened at Karbala for years? What, you think on the Friday prayer in Saudi Arabia on the 10th of Muharram, they're going to talk about what happened to the grandson of Muhammad? They're going to talk about fasting on Ashura, how the Prophet learned from the Jews how to fast, and how the Prophet said, I've got a greater right than Moses has. Let's fast on Ashura. How ironic. The grandson of Muhammad dies on the 10th of Muharram, and Muhammad's own followers find it hard to remember him. Because of what? Because of self-flagellation? Forget those who self-flagellate. Ask yourself that when the Prophet tells me about Hussein, and I go every year without listening to a single lecture on his life, am I really honoring the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad? So how about those who self-flagellate themselves? It's not part of Shi'ah doctrine. It's a cultural act. Does culture have a place within Islam? Yes. Unless culture breaks law. What do I mean? When the Prophet came to Arabia, there was some Arabian culture he didn't even change. Arabs for 4 months in the year wouldn't fight each other. Muharram, Rajab, Dhul Qa'dah, Dhul Hijjah. True? He saw no need to change that. You should keep those 4 months, and there should be no war. Then there were other things in Arabian culture which were seen as being bad. For example, burying your daughters alive. That was not allowed. When you honor Hussein, the Shi'ah who honor Hussein, number one, normally do it, I'm sure many of you have seen. Normally there are 10 lectures in that first 10 nights. Do you agree? I'm sure some of you may have come across, most mosques have 10 lectures in those first 10 nights. Is that allowed? Of course it is. Any lecture which reminds you of the Holy Prophet's family is allowed in Islam. There's not a single Muslim who denies that. Number two, some of them come forward and beat their chests. Is that allowed? Where does it stem from? Some say it stems from the granddaughter of Muhammad by the name of Zainab, who slaps herself viciously when she hears the news of her brother's martyrdom. Others say no, it's a cultural act. You'll see them walking and going like this. When they go like this, there are extremes to it. There are some who rip off their shirts and go out publicly and do it. Is that what the scholars tell them? No. In every school in Islam, there are certain bands whose culture outweighs their religion. And however much you'll try and tell them that there are certain actions which are going a bit extreme, they won't listen to you. There are some who use chains and hurt their backs. There are some, how many of you have seen the following sight of getting a sword and striking your head? The scholars come forward and state, you are harming yourself, it is haram. But unfortunately, what the scholars state sometimes goes in one ear, out of the other. And that if you now come and tell someone that you are flagellating and it's wrong, they will not listen. But the basis of the message which the majority of the Shiites follow is the message of understanding Hussein and the messianic role, because Hussein was martyred in Karbala. And his martyrdom, according to the Shiites, will be avenged by the Mahdi. The Mahdi being the Imam of the Shiites, the 12th, who went into occultation. Someone will say, occultation. I read one book, very much related to misconceptions about Shi'ah, which says they believe he was in some cellar underground, then he escaped. What happened to Jesus? Ilyas, where is he? Where's Idris? Oh, they're in occultation. Oh, so it's all right to believe in the occultation that easily. What happened to Muhammad on the night of Hijrah? He leaves his house. How? God doesn't let them see him. Go put that in an academic argument, see what happens. He leaves his house without God letting anyone see him, so that he can go from Mecca to Medina. No, no, academic arguments, we don't care about academia. We're religious Muslims and we believe in what... Well, if you find it easy to believe God can make this for Muhammad, why can't he make it for the son of Muhammad? If the son of Muhammad, Muhammad himself has prophecies, Mahdi this, Mahdi that, Mahdi this, Mahdi that. At the end of time, there will be the savior. There's not a single Muslim who doesn't believe in the Mahdi. And I don't know, any of you have come across the arrivals on YouTube recently. And you'll see this whole idea of the Antichrist versus the Mahdi. The Shiites are of the opinion that Mahdi was born. Our brothers in other schools are of the opinion, no, he's to be born. And he will bring justice. No problem. It's a dialogue on an academic level. It can be discussed through narrations. But for some people to come and say it's barbaric or it's stupid for people to believe in occultation, let's not go too far into where Jesus is. So anyway, so here on this narration, we find Messianism, Shi'ah, Mahdi. Some Shi'ah, very stagnant. Mahdi, you know what, we'll try and work for the man. But let him just come in his own time. Others, no. We have to be practical. We've got to work to create a system of justice where Mahdi is able to return. But the main point is that the vision is Mahdi avenges Karbala. Muhammad's grandson is killed. Mahdi comes back to avenge the injustice of that act. And that's why the final area, the future of intra-faith dialogue. We're very good at interfaith, but we seem to have no intra-faith. In our mosques, Shi'as don't go to Sunni mosques. Sunnis don't go to Shi'ah mosques. Even though a mosque is the house of Allah, it should not be a Sunni or a Shi'ah place. It's the house of God. Anybody should be welcome. Sometimes our problem is our own problem. Our speakers, both Shi'ah and Sunni, can be condescending, can be rude, can be abusive. They are the ones who make each other run away from one another. They don't allow for unity, rather they call for disunity. Whereas the Quran in chapter 3, verse 103, tells us, beware and hold on to the rope of God and do not disunite. This verse was revealed about the Aus and the Khazraj in Medina. The Aus and the Khazraj used to hate each other. Mus'ab bin Umair, may Allah bless his soul, brought them both back together. When he brought them back together, the narration is there which states that one day when the Prophet was in Medina, the Aus, their head was sitting and the Khazraj was sitting. And watch how it relates to the way Sunnis and Shias live their life today. The head of the Aus was sitting down. He said to the head of the Khazraj, you know what? Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh is from us. Head of the Khazraj says, so what? Mu'adh ibn Jabal is from us. Then the head of the Aus said, Khuzaymah bin Thabit is from us. And then the other one replied, Zayd ibn Thabit is from us. Before you knew it, they started a punch-up with each other. These guys were on top of each other. Why? They were trying to narrate, we have him, you have him. We have him, we... The Holy Prophet came and said, before you used to fight each other, now Islam has come. As a blessing, do not disunite. Don't say we have him and you have him. Say we have the religion of Islam. And that we seek to work together in dialogue with one another. Recently in Amman, there was an agreement for all the different schools in Islam to come together in dialogue. And that this agreement was headed by the king in Jordan, who invited scholars from all the different schools to try and come together in peace. And without unity, this religion will never move forward. When I say unity, it doesn't mean you compromise your beliefs. It means you're willing to discuss them with respect and not with hatred. You're willing to discuss them with references, and you're willing to come to the conclusion that if this is the right way, may God guide us. And if it's not, let us continue to look for guidance. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. Question here. What is the status of Aisha radiallahu anha in Shia Islam? Is it permissible to slander her or any of the companions in Shia Islam? Well, without a shadow of doubt, as the wife of the Prophet, she occupies a position as the mother of the believers in the Quran. But within the Shia school, she is not seen very highly at all. The reason she is not seen highly at all is because of her actions against the fourth Khalifa, or the successor of the Prophet. Not only against the successor, who I will come to in a second, but also because of the verses in the Quran, which themselves discuss her and Hafsa's actions in Surah 66, verse 1, verse 3, verse 4. All of them discuss how Aisha and Hafsa, the way they, number one, made fun of Rasulullah's breath when he used to go to his wife Zainab, because she used to drink, he used to drink a drink from her made from honey. Imam al-Bukhari narrates that when he'd come back, the two of them would come forward and state what? The two of them would come forward and say that your breath doesn't smell nice. He stopped drinking the drink until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed Surah 66, verse number 1. Verse 3 and 4 of Surah Al-Tahrim and 5. When verse 5, God says, if they do not repent, then we will give you better wives. We will happily divorce them and give you better wives. The narration is about when they divulge the secret. There is not a single book of tafsir which disagrees with what I have just said. You can go and read every book of tafsir which will mention the two of them and their actions. That was in the time of the Prophet. After the Prophet dies, she, according to the Shiite school, leads the army against Ali ibn Abi Talib, and not only leads the army against Ali ibn Abi Talib, according to the Shiite school, is the cause of the deaths of thousands of companions. Ali ibn Abi Talib forgives her for her action, and after he passes away, she continues to have a difference of opinion with his son Hassan. Therefore, she is not seen highly within the school of the Shia. Of course, that's the opinion of the scholars. In terms of slandering, Quran says in Surah 6, verse 108, وَلَا تَسُبُّوا الَّذِينَ يَدْعُونَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ فَيَسُبُّوا اللَّهَ عَدْوًا بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ. Do not abuse the idols of the idol worshippers, otherwise they'll turn around and abuse your Lord. If you can't abuse the idol of the idol worshippers, how then can you abuse a lady who lived with Rasulullah? Therefore, the Quran is adamant in Surah 6, verse 108, as a conclusion that it is not allowed in the school of the Shia, and it is forbidden to slander Aisha. Thank you very much. Question here, how are the 12 Imams determined? Different narrations state that the Holy Prophet announces that there will be 12 Imams after me. If on the first level I put forward the argument that after the Holy Prophet, of the 12 Imams of the Shia, the first 11 are the most knowledgeable men in each generation in which they lived. And that argument can be backed up by any narration. Ali Zayn al-Abidin, Muhammad al-Baqir, Ja'far al-Sadiq, Musa ibn Ja'far, Ali ibn Musa, Muhammad ibn Ali. All I ask you to do, forget that there are 12. After the Prophet Muhammad dies and the 300 years after him, with each of those 11, find if you could see a scholar more knowledgeable than them living in their time. The top scholars attest that each of the Imams of Ahl al-Bayt, living in each time, is the most knowledgeable of scholars. Abu Hanifa has the famous line, لولا السنتان لهلك النعمان. If it wasn't for my 2 years with Ja'far al-Sadiq, I would have been perished. Umar bin Abdul Aziz and the scholars who lived in his time would say, because there is a narration which says, Umar bin Abdul Aziz used to receive inspiration, ilham. And the reply that came was what? The reply that came was, Umar bin Abdul Aziz said, if you think I receive inspiration, then what does Zayn al-Abidin receive with all his knowledge? Muhammad al-Baqir likewise. Ali ibn Musa Rida lived in the time of Ahmad ibn Hanbal. Ahmad ibn Hanbal says there is none as knowledgeable as Ali ibn Musa. Yahya bin Aktham lived in the time of Muhammad al-Jawad. I'm giving you the name of the most famous scholars living in the time of each Imam. And the most famous scholars testify that each Imam of Ahlul Bayt was the most knowledgeable person in their time. Therefore, number one, that's this. Number two, they are determined through Rasulullah before his passing away. The Shia narrations come forward and state that he announces the names of all of these. There is a book by the name of Yanabi' al-Mawadda. Yanabi' al-Mawadda by the famous Hanafi scholar Al-Qunduzi al-Hanafi, who says that the Prophet said Moses had 12 disciples, Jesus had 12, and I have 12. And he begins to narrate them one by one. And he tells his companion Jabir bin Abdullah al-Ansari that you will meet the fifth of the Imams, Muhammad al-Baqir. Jabir met Muhammad al-Baqir after Karbala happened. And so these are the narrations which are there within the books. Why do the Ismailis continue to have present living Imams and the other sects don't? It's an interesting question. Of course, the split with the Ismailis occurs over the sons of Ja'far ibn Muhammad. Ja'far ibn Muhammad, amongst his sons, the eldest of them was Ismail. The second was Abdullah. The third was Musa ibn Ja'far. Ismail died in the 138th year after Hijrah. Ja'far al-Sadiq died in the 148th year after Hijrah. Therefore, Ismail died before his father. There are narrations which say when he died, his father at his funeral done something very peculiar. What he did was that he had come forward and he had said, "O people, is Ismail dead?" They said to him, "Yes, he is." Again, "Is Ismail dead?" "Yes, he is." Some people said that it's probably a grieving father who wanted to make sure that his son has died. The reply was that no, it was to make everyone clear that this Ismail has what? Has died. He will not live after me. The narration then says Ismail's son Muhammad was then taken as the Imam. And the lineages, not of every Ismaili school, there are a number of Ismaili schools, which if you want we can go into depth in, but there are a number of Ismaili schools. Some of them believe in the occultation of Muhammad ibn Ismail and his return at the end of time. Others are of the opinion that no, the line continued, and then there was a split around the 21st successor of the Agha Khanis and the Bahoras. And so until today, you have Agha Khani Ismailis and you have Bahora Ismailis. Therefore, they believe in occultation, but not necessarily the same occultation of the Shia when it comes to Al-Mahdi. There is a belief in some schools that Muhammad ibn Ismail returns at the end to bring justice on the earth. Can you talk about the political implications of Shi'ism, especially as in Iran being the voice of Shia Islam? Well, of course, you have within the Shia world political theories. Iran's political theory of Wilayat al-Faqih is not something set in concrete. It's a theory that has developed over time of the authority of the jurisprudent leading the Islamic State. And therefore, Iran, leading the Islamic State, comes forward with its own political policies. Does that mean these political policies are incumbent or binding on every Shia? No, they're not. If a Shia decides to follow, for example, Sayyid Ali Sistani, then the politics of, for example, the Iraqi government and the Shia rulers there may be the direction of the political establishment. Now, for example, Iran has its own political policies or its own political statements. Ahmadinejad, for example, some people say came forward and said we want to wipe Zionism off the map or wipe Israel off the map. Well, of course, it's a dangerous situation for us living in America, as an example, or in the UK, when there is such a blunt statement which is made. But when the statements are taken into context, what is the political policy different from what 154 members of the UN General Assembly want? How many times, and Finkelstein is the best advocate of such an idea, how many times the UN General Assembly votes about Israel? It's always 154 against 3, 161 against 7. Now, I was discussing with some of the brothers earlier that the 7 are normally places you go on a honeymoon to. As in, barring Israel and America, the rest is whom? Marshall Islands. I don't know if anyone's been to the Marshall Islands, but all of a sudden they have a strong voice. And a few other places which I think are islands this big, who now have a voice supporting the Israeli cause. If Ahmadinejad, for example's political stance is seen as being somewhat strange, well then 154 other members of the UN General Assembly are strange. Whereas the rest of them all disagree on the position of Israel. Is Iran's political position something wrong when Iran advocates the support of Gaza and Palestine more than some so-called Sunni countries? Really like the presence of Egypt in that situation. So what, Iran continues to say Palestine, Palestine, Palestine. People are like anti-Iran, anti-Iran. Why anti-Iran? As in Iran, Khomeini is the first person who came forward and said Quds Day. There's a day called the Quds Day. To remember whom? Sunnis? No, to remember Muslim brothers. Political policy is wrong. Well, if you're going to look after Muslim brothers, or for example, I don't need to mention any names because I might not get a visa back here. But for example, across the border of Palestine, you know where I'm going. I'm not going to mention his name. He rules a certain group of people who are very strong, mountain people, completely to whoever came near them. He supports Palestine more than any other. And he's the biggest supporter of Sayyid Ali Khamenei in Iran. And the whole Sunni world, if we're talking Sunni politics and Shia politics, the whole Sunni world takes him as their leader in the idea that barring the extreme factions which gave a Friday khutbah on the time when his people were defeating a certain group of people in Saudi Arabia, there was a khutbah which said, do not support the man. Why? Because he's a Shia. And yet the Shia man comes in every one of his lectures and says, support our brothers in Palestine. So Iran's political policies don't seem to have much of a problem. It's only whether the word Shia makes us have a problem with them. And it continues to say also, are the international intra-faith conferences really working or good photo opportunities? Well, I agree with whoever says that when I say that some of them are straight photo opportunities. I'm not going to deny that. But you know what? That's the world we live in, us Muslims. In many cases, we're working for photo opportunities with those who rule the Arabian states. You ask them for help, they'd rather side with your enemies than side with you. So if a photo opportunity is the only way to bring Sunni and Shia leaders together, then let's begin somewhere. You see, some countries in the Middle East, unbelievable. They'd rather support the cause of oppression and go against their own Muslim brothers. And if Muslim brothers can get together in a photo op for Sunni Shia unity, you know what, let's start somewhere. Because we can't continue with this backward-minded thinking that they are this and we are this. If that disunity continues, there's no way we're going to develop. And so, it may be photo ops. On the other hand, I do believe, like for example, having known from Iran especially, Iran has excellent Shia Sunni conferences. And they don't really make many of the photos, to tell you the truth. You have to be invited to really know the amount that goes on in terms of bringing together the sects in the religion of Islam in Iran. I think sometimes there are people with a bad image of a country which has done more to try and bring Muslims together than any other place. I was actually reading, any of you read the articles of Reza Zia Ibrahimi? Well, he wrote an article recently about Iran, and he was talking about the whole idea that they say Iran is anti-Jewish and so on. There's a member of the Iranian parliament who's Jewish. And when Khatami went and visited all the synagogues within Iran, there's no problem with a person being Jewish in an Islamic country. Iran's political policies are differing with Zionism, not with Judaism. And there's a difference between the Zionist and the Jew. Does joining a Sunni organization contradict a Shia's loyalty to Imam Mahdi? No way. Joining a Sunni organization contradicts the Shia loyalty to Imam Mahdi. On the contrary, the Sunni brothers all believe in Imam al-Mahdi. But they may not believe he's born yet. But the idea of justice within the Imam, that's still amongst us. I, as a speaker, have lectured in many Sunni organizations. That's not changing my loyalties. Rather, I'm finding brethren who I can work with on this issue. I've lectured with Sunni organizations here in the United Kingdom, across Europe, across the Middle East. And until today, many of my closest friends who are fellow speakers on the circuit, until today, many of them work together, and we're best of friends in trying to work together to bring a healthy environment within the Islamic world. Anyone who has this very narrow-minded vision, unfortunately, that's the vision which is causing trouble for the religion of Islam. Known misconceptions of Shia Islam start from divisions within. Ismaili follow Imamat, Ithna Ashari, the Sunnis follow the Caliphate. Well, each of the schools in Islam has their own definition as to what is Caliphate. After the Prophet passes away, the method of choosing a Caliph even differs between Caliph to Caliph. The first Caliph was chosen in an election. The second was chosen by the first. The third was chosen by 6. The fourth was chosen by the whole community. If a school wants to subscribe to that opinion, that's their opinion. There's no concrete way. The first Caliph, the Prophet, is dead, is being elected in Saqifa, while the Prophet is being buried. The second Caliph gets chosen by the first. Well, if the second can get chosen by the first, so why couldn't the Prophet choose? As in, the first has the ability to choose, but the Prophet doesn't choose. I don't know how that works, but it's a political opinion. What I'm trying to say is that every school in Islam has their own understanding of the origin of the religion. The Shi'ah, as I said, are of the opinion that the Imam is chosen by the Prophet before the Prophet passes away. And so with each school's opinion, every school has considerable evidence which come to back up these opinions. When I speak to fellow Sunni scholars in the world, when we've studied, be it at Al-Azhar when we were together, or be it, for example, at any other institute, you'll find that they'll show me a corpus of narrations as to why and how you choose a caliph. Every school uses those narrations in determining the history. At the end, it's your personal research which has to come together to find your own conclusion. If you believe that 6 people in a shura can choose the Khalifa, if 4 of them agree, you have to kill the 2 that disagree. If 5 agree, you kill the 1 that disagrees. If 3 agree and 3 disagree, then Abd al-Rahman bin Auf makes the decision. If you believe that's the method of choosing a Khalifa, stick to it. If you ask me what's my personal opinion isn't an opinion I just thought rationally about. It's an opinion which, like any other Muslim, is something which isn't inherited by our fathers and mothers, but is rather something which is studied through the narrations, and then a conclusion is reached. And that's where all the Muslims reach their argument through. Is Al-Kafi considered the most authentic book of hadith and athar in Shia Islam? If so, what are Al-Jami' and Al-Mushaf Fatima, or what are why Al-Jami' and Mushaf Fatima mentioned in several narrations there? Well, the 4 canonical books within the Shia school, the first of them is Al-Kafi fi Ilm al-Din by Shaykh al-Kulayni. That's the first. The second one is Man la yahduruhu al-Faqih of Shaykh al-Saduq. The third and the fourth are the Tahdhib and the Istibsar of Shaykh al-Tusi. These are seen as the 4 most reliable works and are seen as the 4 earliest. Well, earliest is under debate, depending whether you take Kitab Sulaym bin Qais as being an earlier work and so on. But anyway, these are seen as the 4 most authentic. Then what is the Jami' and Mushaf of Fatima? First and foremost, the Jami' and the Mushaf aren't with us. They are seen as being with the 12th Imam. That's according to Shia opinion. What's the Jami' and the Mushaf of Fatima? That's the books which is narrated that Jibreel had given to Fatima after her father had passed away, and the grief that she went through after the father had passed away, which gave knowledge about what will come from now and in future events which may come about. Not knowledge of the day of judgment, knowledge of future events. And that was passed from Imam to Imam, and the belief is that that is with the 12th, but that's not a book of narrations, in the sense that that book doesn't come with us today, which is used as a book of narrations. The book of narrations are those four, and they are seen as being the earliest works and narrations. Do the Shi'ah have a book called Sahih? No, they don't. So in contrast to Sahih al-Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, the Shi'ah believe that any book is open to examination except the Quran. Every other book, you have to check through the chains before coming to an understanding of reliability. Within Al-Kafi, you may find narrators who later research found that some of them were fabricators, and therefore if a narration within Al-Kafi contradicts the Quran, the narration cannot be taken. Okay, question here, Surah An-Nisa, verse 105 and 6. Allah instructs the Prophet, we have sent down to you the book in truth, that you might judge between men, as guided by Allah. So don't be used as an advocate by those who betray their trust, but seek the forgiveness of Allah, for Allah is oft forgiving. There's different interpretations as to why the verse was revealed, but amongst the general interpretations is that you found that the Prophet would be entering alliances with whom? He'd be entering alliances with the people of Arabia. Some of these people would try as much as possible to try and get allowances for themselves which go against the teachings of the religion of Islam. And you found that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to the Prophet, continue to judge by that which we reveal to you. Don't be used as an advocate by those who betray the trust. Seek forgiveness. Seeking forgiveness does not only mean that you sin. The word ighfir has four meanings in the Arabic language. One of them, seek the protection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Which means in any decision you make, when you judge between the people of Arabia, make sure you judge by seeking the protection of Allah. Some translate it literally by saying seek forgiveness, as in the Prophet had made a mistake in the way he was making decisions, and he had to ask Allah for forgiveness. Whereas another opinion is the opinion of seeking protection. The opinion comes from the story of Nabi Musa, which we mentioned earlier, when he says, Rabbi ighfirli. Ighfirli in this story doesn't mean forgive me, it means, Ya Allah, protect me from the people of Fir'aun. So therefore the word forgiveness has different meanings. Can you suggest some books that are easily available for Sunnis to read to get the Shi'ah perspective? It depends which area you're interested in. Because I don't want to recommend a book to you and it might not be your chosen area. If whoever's asked the question wants to be specific, I can recommend certain good books. If you want to start at a really basic level, let's just say basic beliefs, Sayyid Mustafa al-Qazwini, Imam of Orange County, has a good series of books which have just been published, 3 books relating to the Shi'ah. They've all just been published. I think they're excellent works. In terms of other books, if you're looking for discussions about Shi'ah Sunni, discussions on Imamat and Khilafah and Asma and so on, there is a book called Al-Muraja'at. Al-Muraja'at. It's a dialogue between one of the heads of the house of the seminary of the Shia world with one of the heads of Al-Azhar. They wrote letters to each other discussing every single area. It's available on the internet. Al-Muraja'at by Sayyid Sharafuddin Al-Musawi. In terms of books on history, on the, like a perspective on the early period, there's a book written by Ali Asghar Razawi. Ali Asghar Razawi. And the book is called A Restatement of the History of Islam. Ali Asghar Razawi, A Restatement of the History of Islam. He uses non-Shia and academic sources only in his arguments. If you want a book which is a purely academic discussion about the succession to the Prophet Muhammad, there's a book called The Succession to Muhammad. Yeah. And the book is by Wilfred Madelung, professor at Oxford. discussion over the early differences on the caliphate through traditional and academic sources. Those hopefully will be helpful to you. Okay, regarding occultation, so God himself revealed the condition of Jesus. How do you know the condition of the Imam? Well, God himself doesn't reveal the condition of Jesus in the occultation. There's not one verse in the Quran which says what Jesus is doing now. It's all in the narratives. Likewise, the narratives are there from the earliest traditions, earliest books of traditions, which come forward and state what the Mahdi is doing within the occultation. Different narratives come forward from the Imams, notably Ja'far al-Sadiq, when he talks about that when the Mahdi is in the occultation, amongst his roles will be, he will help those people who are lost on a journey. Amongst his roles is that he will be at Hajj every year. And amongst his roles as well is to be at the funeral of every believer who passes away. In the sense that every pious believer, now pious doesn't mean a million of them, because we all claim to be pious, yet we've all got faults. There's only a few of us who are truly sincere. And so amongst the narrations they say that that is one of his roles. Another of his roles is that he helps the scholars in answering the questions of the time. And so these come from the narratives about what his role is in the period of occultation. Likewise, we have narratives about the role of Jesus, son of Mary, the role of Idris, the role of Prophet Khidr, about what they are doing in occultation as well. It's the narratives which are the main corpus which discuss what is happening during the occultation. The Shiites break their fast at a different time, a long time after the Maghrib. Why? Believe me, I'm gagging as much as you are to eat, you know, so don't think I enjoy breaking the fast. A long time, I think the word long is a bit, let's just say 10 minutes after the Maghrib. What's Maghrib? Well, it depends on which scholar of jurisprudence you follow. أقم الصلاة لدلوك الشمس إلى غسق الليل. What's the difference between the word غسق and the word shafaq? Does it say shafaq al-layl or ghasaq al-layl? If it said shafaq, it means that there is still light, there is still redness. If it means ghasaq, it means darkness. And so the idea within Shia jurisprudence is that there has to be complete darkness for Maghrib to be confirmed. And that's the difference in opinion. Number two, why do the second Khalifa Ammar al-Faruq and Uthman ibn Affan are cursed by Shi'ah? Once again, and I'll repeat again, if you are a Shi'ah who curses, it's not allowed in Shi'ah thought. I'm not going to represent splinter groups who curse. I'm saying, what's the word curse in Arabic? The word sab. Quran says, وَلَا تَسُبُّهُ. Ali ibn Abi Talib, in the Battle of Siffin, some of his companions began to curse Muawiyah. He said, I do not like that my followers are those who curse. If there are Shia who do this, this cursing is not allowed in Islamic thought. I think that's all the questions here. I'd like to thank everyone for attending today, and I'd like to thank Noor and the whole MSA in working on this area. And hopefully this will be the first of many times we meet each other, and I hope we've answered all your questions. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.